Hi, I'm John Walland and you're watching Joburg Today.
The big issue today is illegal mining threatening the pipeline infrastructure of Joburg. Tsepo, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, to start off with, how big is the risk that is currently imposed by illegal mining on the pipeline infrastructure?
Well, based on the risk assessment that we have conducted as the City of Johannesburg Disaster Management, we had looked at various factors as comprehensively as possible. Firstly, looking at the type of hazard that we are faced with, looking at our vulnerability elements, starting from infrastructure, population that is likely to be affected, and also looking at our capacity to respond. So having analyzed all those factors and putting those indicators into place, one would easily say that the situation can be catastrophic. Firstly, looking at the magnitude of which this explosion might have in our communities or in our infrastructure. It has a potential to affect us socioeconomically, which also can affect investor confidence within the city, looking at the type of impact that we are faced with. For example, we have one of the critical facilities, such as the FNB Stadium, previously known as the Soccer City, which was utilized during the 2010 World Cup. That on its own, if we're looking at the capacity when there is major events taking place, looking at the number of population that are likely to be affected, because it happens that the gas pipe also runs underneath actually the FNB Stadium. So in a situation where we have an event taking place there, where we have a population that can be anything exceeding 90,000, one would imagine the type of impacts that would be suffered in that eventuality. So if the question is, how big is the risk? So we can say it's disaster management. The situation is major. So it's quite a major threat that we are currently faced with.
Is the current mining measurable in terms of its proximity to gas pipelines?
Well, we don't have, as the center, the Disaster Management Center, scientific evidence for us to be able to support that statement in terms of the proximity. But having conducted risk assessments which looked into the areas that are likely to be affected, looking at the proximities of the critical areas, the proximity is quite close, because it has also been proven just recently through our forensic unit that this activity is actually at a scale whereby it's at a very close proximity, whereby even in terms of measurements, one could even state that it's between 300 to 500 centimeters close. So we are at a very close proximity given the current situation.
Do Joburg pipelines enjoy the same protection as other facilities under the Critical Infrastructure Protection Bill?
Well, when we look at or we study the bill on its own, there's a lot of functions, powers and functions that must be exercised by the Minister of Mineral Resources, and also even the National Commissioner that has to exercise in terms of the duties. But unfortunately, over the years, we have not seen, or we are not convinced that these duties are being exercised properly. It's just like in the case of the national key points. Within Johannesburg, we have a number of areas that have been declared national key points, but we have not seen those duties and powers being exercised. And unfortunately, these are amongst powers that are also beyond the city's competency. So as a city, we don't have the competency even to deal with these measures that relate to mineral resources and how they should be managed. And even the protection of the critical infrastructure bill also provides or makes requirements that should be made to ensure that there is adequate protection that takes place. We have not seen that yet. We know these forums, of which we are also participants in those forums as the city, But we are not convinced enough that the forums have the capacity to actually exercise those powers. So that's quite a serious question you're asking me. If I am to give that point of view as the City of Johannesburg disaster management, you know, the mayor has made a statement in that regard, because all the mayor requested in his request through the minister was that these are pending issues in terms of illegal mining in Johannesburg, but we are concerned as the city, seeing that we don't have a capacity to deal with, but it's within the competency of national government and the Minerals Resources Department capacity actually to deal with the situation. So I am not convinced, I must be honest, to say we are enjoying or there is compliance in that regard within the City of Johannesburg. Yes, there is forums, but forums are not good enough.
All right. Let me proceed with a follow-up question on that.
Okay.
Are you happy with the current resources that you have at your hands, at your disposal, to tackle, let's say, God forbid, an event of such an epic proportion?
Okay. Firstly, you know, when we do an analysis into the risk profile of the city, it's also important that we also need to run a test on our state of readiness, looking at our resource capacity in various angles, various aspects. In this case, in the event, God forbid, in the event of a major explosion, the first resources required there would be ranging from emergency services, obviously provision for fire engines, the urban search and rescue unit to be deployed, emergency medical technicians to be deployed, and also security agencies as well, whereby there's, you know, a role to be played. Now, when we look at our manageability and capacity to respond, you know, I'm talking here in terms of the capacity of the city. Firstly, our urban search and rescue teams are actually accredited even to run international rescue missions, and there's also a very good story to tell about the team. But when we also look at the report that was recently published through the media, and whereby the MMC for Public Safety actually made an admission that given the status that we have, we do not that well resourced, so meaning that the capacity has some limitation to some extent, but there is also developments which are very positive to ensure that as the City of Johannesburg we are able to reach that capacity. But also taking into consideration our population growth that is taking place, it's major. And looking at the service standards as well, international service standards that are also published, where you also have to now provide a ratio looking at your population number vis-a-vis your resource capacity. There's still a big gap. But the department is working hard on ensuring that at least that ratio we are able to meet, whereby if we are going to say, if we are serving the community of Johannesburg, which has a population of just close to 5 million, but vis-a-vis our resource capacity in terms of emergency services, disaster management personnel, there's still a big gap. But there is positive developments that are taking place. The MMC also recently made a pronouncement that even the fire stations would be resourced with more fire engines. Over 100 fire engines are going to be sourced. So there is also a very good story that is also coming up to ensure that we are able to match this gap.
And on that note, Tsepo, I want to thank you for making time to come through to the big issue to talk to us about what's happening with the Joburg Disaster Management Agency.
Thank you so much.